It's a 501c3 nonprofit whose goal is to end harmful practices against women and girls, such as child marriage, human trafficking, and other forms of gender-based violence. We made history multiple times here in California. When we launched the California Coalition to End Child Marriage on September 14, 2019, where Senator Dunn was with us that day too, when the city of Irvine passed our resolution to end child marriage under 18, no exceptions, which was the first city in the great state of California, and when the city of Newport Beach issued the first proclamation in support of ending child marriage under 18, no exceptions. It was also when we hosted the first summit, child marriage survivors hearing their stories, followed by an advocacy summit in 2020. Our resolution today has passed in 13 out of the 34 cities in Orange County and in Culver City. 7 states across the nation that I testified before through various House and Senate committees to end child marriage under 18, no exceptions, were in New Hampshire, Hawaii, Rhode Island, Kansas, New York, and Alaska. And as you know, in New York and Rhode Island, we do have now legislation to end child marriage under 18, no exceptions. In Alaska, we were able to raise the minimum age from 14 to 16, and we're working on 18, no exceptions in the coming years. It is now my privilege to introduce the child marriage survivors in the room with us. Elizabeth Siton, she's a board member. Dawn Tyree, she's our child marriage survivor relations specialist, and Sarah Tasneem. We work very closely with these 3 powerful ladies, and we thank you for sharing your stories and for all your advocacy. I would also at this time like to introduce some of the dignitaries attending here with us. You are all very important to us, and thank you for your support. With us is Aisha Wahab, Senator-elect, District 10. As the councilwoman from the city of Hayward, she was the first Afghan-American to be elected into office into the U.S. Bill Isaini, he's an assembly member-elect from the 63rd Assembly District. That's the Inland Empire in California. Chad Zimmerman, mayor of Villa Park, and this is the great announcement that we wanted to make today. Villa Park just passed our resolution to end child marriage under 18, no exceptions last Tuesday. Thank you, Mayor Zimmerman, for your advocacy and for your leadership, and it passed. Also with us is Peggy Wong, a dear friend. She's Yerba Linda City Council member, 2014 to present. She was the mayor from 2017 to 2021. And also she's the Deputy Attorney General in the Office of the California Attorney General, Criminal Appeals Trial and Writs Section. Susan Sunny, she's a Buena Park Council member, District 3. Ash Alvandi, he's here in his own personal capacity, but he's also District Director for Senator Dave Min. We also have with us Tia LeBron. She's a Louisiana resident and former and future candidate for Congress. She just ran for the Louisiana 3rd District Congressional District. So thank you all for being here with us. And I just wanted to summarize what happened recently. There has, through this year, basically, there are 3 states that took action on child marriage this year, including Massachusetts, which became the 7th state to end child marriage entirely. Maryland also made significant progress after 7 years of campaigning, raising its minimum age to 17 and implementing a protective judicial approval process for older minors. Alaska took an incremental step forward as well, raising its age floor from 14 to 16, ensuring most minors will go before a judge before being able to marry. Okay, so I'm going to introduce Senator Joe Dunn at this time, and then I will go into the global statistics to see if Kristen is able to have the rep join us. Now it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Senator Joe Dunn. I've known Senator Dunn for the longest time. In fact, I delivered flowers to women over 60 in his district when he ran for the first time. And I say that's why he won. But Senator Dunn was a member of the California State Senate from 1998 to 2006. In the legislature, he chaired key committees such as Senate Judiciary Committee and the Senate Housing Committee. He received international acclaim as chair of the Senate Investigation Committee into the 2001 California energy crisis, and subsequently as the man who cracked Enron, California, according to California Lawyer magazine. Prior to entering the Senate, he was a plaintiff's lawyer in Orange County working on mass tort cases surrounding child sexual abuse in the Catholic Church, big tobacco, nuclear radiation contamination, and products liability litigation of defective medical devices and pharmaceuticals. He joined the Newport Beach office of Robbins Kaplan after law school, and then Calgany Robinson, also in Newport Beach, where he continued to focus on sexual abuse, products liability, and complex litigation until his election to the Senate. Following his two terms in the state Senate, Senator Dunn served as CEO of both the California Medical Association and the State Bar of California. He is currently a lecturer at the University of California Irvine School of Law, an institution he co-founded while in the Senate. At UCI Law, he helped launch the UCI Cybersecurity Policy and Research Institute, the Civil Justice Research Institute, the Cannabis Research Center, and most recently, the overall artificial intelligence and the law effort at the law school. He currently serves as a trustee for the UCI Foundation and serves on the board of several organizations fighting sexual abuse in society. He also serves on our board. We are privileged to have him. And I give you Senator Joe Dunn.
Thank you, Rima. Do we have our representative on yet?
Okay. Gus, would you please text Kristen to find out where we are at this time? But in the meantime, I just wanted to go, Senator, if it's okay with you, through some global figure.
Of course.
Can you figure a guess of how many women and girls alive today that was married before the age of 18? Put it in the chat. How many women and girls alive today that were married before the age of 18? Tia, you might want to increase that a bit. Okay, 850 million women alive today that were married before the age of 18. Do you know how many women and girls get married before the age of 18 annually? Can you guess that number? Put it in the chat, please. Okay, it's 12 million. It's 12 million annually. Do you know if child marriage is legal? Yes, this is globally, Maybrit. Do you know if child marriage is legal in the US? Of course, we know the answer to that. Put that in the chat. Is it legal in the US? Yay, Peggy, sure, yes. How many states is it legal in still? In how many states is it still legal? Tia? It is. All right, Tia, you got it. 43. Good job, good job. And can you list the states that have passed legislations to end child marriage under 18 so far? And I know Don and Elizabeth will nail this hands down. And Peggy, of course. Oh, Tia. Cali is behind the times, man. It's only we have the reputation of being a progressive state, but unfortunately, that's not the case in this instance. Okay, let's see who's gonna venture. Okay, which states have passed? New York, New Jersey. Okay, Dana, good. There's some that are missing. So Delaware is the first state, New Jersey, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and New York, and recently Massachusetts. Okay, good job, everyone. And now, thank you, Senator, for allowing me to go through this informal poll. And let's take it from here. All right, Profe, what's your answer? Okay, it's close. Okay, let me, in the meantime, while the senator takes it over, I'm going to find out what's happening with our guest speaker.
Good morning, everybody. Well, good morning for those of us here on the West Coast in the United States, and afternoon or evening to everybody else. Welcome, and thank you for taking some time. I'll echo Rima's comment. Apologies for the technical difficulties in getting the representative on the Zoom meeting or even just phone calls. So sorry about that. And Rima, if you can still hear me, just a heads up. I'm here at the house, everybody. Well, my wife is out running errands with the dog, and so if she wakes up and starts barking, I will push mute, and Rima, you'll have to jump in at that point in time. So it's I just want to add to that way too long bio that Rima had shared that I still work pretty extensively outside of my law school position and the other work that I do in fighting childhood sexual abuse and adult sexual abuse in all its forms, including, as some on this call know, we spent the last 3 years building what I'll just call a 5-layer chess game against 4 industries here in the United States that have long, unfortunately, covered up the sexual abuse of women, some men, but mostly women. And those are music, film, fashion, and theater. That's why we ran legislation this year successfully in both California and New York for the first time in the United States to reopen the statute of limitations for civil lawsuits for adult sexual abuse. So we're continuing to make incremental progress around the country on all phases of sexual abuse. Tragically, it comes in so many different forms. None of us care to count. Maybe one day we'll get the United States Congress to declare it a national health crisis. Long overdue, but we all continue on that one as well. Well, we're waiting for us to overcome the technical difficulties. Rima, do we have our representative back?
They tried downloading, not yet. They're
Okay.
downloading the app. That didn't work either. She has no connections. She's going into the school to see if she can get access to Wi-Fi.
All right. All right.
Please.
And Rima, if you don't mind, I was just talking a little bit. If you heard about the fight against child sexual abuse in all of its forms, if you don't mind, you want to share what happened here in California with the legislation to end child marriage? That you were such a principal and critical part to moving that forward as far as one could. But Rima, tell us about the bill to end child marriage finally here in California.
Okay, let me give you a history. Thank you, Senator. In 2017, Senator Jerry Hill from Northern California introduced SB 273. And Valerie Enchante, thank you for joining us all the way from France. And Valerie represents Radio France here in the room with us. So Senator Jerry Hill introduced SB 273 to end child marriage under 18, no exceptions, because one of his constituents came to him and said, my friend in my high school is being coerced into marriage by her parents. I didn't think that child marriage was legal in California. Can you please do something about it? Senator Jerry Hill thought it was a no-brainer. And so he introduced it. And unfortunately, opposition came from surprising organizations. These were Planned Parenthood and ACLU. So the short version is that SB 273 failed. The only thing good that came out of it is that now California is mandated to report minors who get married before the age of 18. And that went into effect 1/1/2019. When we went to the state on January 2020 and we said, please provide us with the report, we received the report and we found out there wasn't much meat to it. So I had a couple of researchers who are volunteering with us call the larger counties and ask them if they had data and whether they reported it or not. So the short story is they did have data. They didn't report it because they said the state didn't ask them for it. When we went to the state and we told them that, they said, we don't have to ask them for it. It's the law. So this was going on. We tried to introduce legislation through my assemblywoman back then. Now I have a new one. Before the redistricting, Assemblywoman Kari Petrie Norris, she introduced legislation to force them to report on a quarterly basis. I wanted to have her add financial penalty, but the Ledge Council said if you add financial penalty, it will not pass. So we introduced that bill for county clerks to report on a quarterly basis. And get to us, folks, do you think that bill passed? No, yeah, I see some people shaking their heads. It didn't pass. It died in suspense file in the Assembly Appropriation Committee, unfortunately, just forcing the county clerk to follow the law and do their job and report those marriages that happen in California. Now, initially, some of these organizations that opposed it said, you don't have any data. So I went to the Census Bureau and I said, okay, I don't know how to use your application. Give me all the data you have on anyone under 18 who was married, divorced, widowed, separated, and other. They kicked back over 13,000 names for me, and it was a 5-year period ending in 2019, and it's only from 15 to 17. They couldn't provide me any data prior to 15-year-old. And anybody who turned 18 when they ran the report was dropped off the report. So we had over 13,000 then. However, the most recent report that was done by McGill University through a grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, it found out that we had over, who can give me a number? How many minors were married in the US between 2000 and 2018? Unmute and give me a guess.
50,000.
300,000. So we had 300,000 in the US minors that were married between 2000 and 2018. In California, we had 23,588. So we have the data, folks. The other factor in opposition was, okay, freedom of religion. So I went to the largest interfaith council in California, and that's the Interfaith Council of Southern California. And I asked them if I could do a presentation there, and I did, and I provided them with our resolution. They voted on it, they passed it. Let me list then the entities that voted that resolution in. The Roman Catholic Archdiocese of LA, the Episcopal Diocese of LA, the Islamic Center of Southern California, the Rabbi Council of Southern California, the Vedanta Society, the Quakers, the Friends, the Krishnas, the Buddhists. So all these major religions and philosophies said no child marriage under 18, no exception. So that takes care of the freedom of religion. I'm just making generalities here, Senator. and then the other opposing issue was freedom of marriage. But are they really, is there really freedom when these children, minors under 18, were coerced into marriage by their parents? Of those 300,000 that were married in the US between 2000 and 2018, 60,000 of them would have been labeled as a sex crime because of the age difference between the minor and the spouse. And those 300,000 minors that were married in the US were mostly girls. married to adult men. So 60,000 would have been considered a sex crime, which is statutory rape, if it wasn't for the marriage. So that's a get out of that. The men get out of free jail card through marriage. When we were able to, when we were invited to raise awareness at Cal State Fullerton's campus, through the graciousness of the president, President Vergy, one of the students came to me and said that she was raped at 14, and the guy convinced her mother that she needs to marry him so he doesn't go to jail. When the father found out about it, he refused to let her marry. And so thankfully, she said, if he didn't do that, I wouldn't be where I am today. When I saw her the next time, I asked her what happened to that guy. She said, we filed a restraining order and he served jail time. For a change, he served jail time. So thank you all for your patience. Let's go to the main attraction. And Senator Dunn, it's back to you.
Thank you very much, Rima. Representative, this is former Senator Joe Dunn. Can you hear us?
Very nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you, Representative, as well. And do you prefer that we refer to you as Representative, or is there a preference that you have?
Whatever. Kay Khan, that's fine.
We'll stay, if you don't have a preference, we'll stay with Representative. So everyone, let me just briefly give a little background to the representative. She's had a long, distinguished career. So with apologies, Representative, I'm going to abbreviate it so we can get right to the main discussion. But the representative got her bachelor's degree from Boston University School of Nursing. A few years later, she returned and got a master's in psychiatric mental health nursing, also from Boston University. And then she held numerous distinguished positions in the field of nursing at Children's Hospital, Massachusetts. She was faculty at Boston University for a while, as well as private practice and numerous other stops along the way. It was a distinguished career before she ever turned to politics. And she took that amazing career and then opted to run and get elected in 1995 and has been representing her district continuously since then. She's been on numerous committees over that period of time, no surprise to any of us. And she's also chaired a number of committees, but most specifically for our discussion today, she was a longtime chair of the Joint Commission on Children, Families, and Persons with Disabilities. She's had lots of legislative priorities, as all of us would expect in that long elected career she's had already. But of course, for this call, one of her top priorities has always been focusing, of course, on children generally, but specifically in ending child marriage, which, of course, is going to be the subject for today. So, Representative, let's just start with some quick, easy questions. Tell us why you decided to run for office in 1995.
Oh my gosh, that's a long time ago. Well, because I'm a healthcare professional. I had worked on many campaigns, had been very active in politics in Massachusetts and in my local community, the city of Newton. And I just thought, well, with my background in healthcare, maybe I could be helpful up in the state legislature. So I decided to run for office, and I had 5 men actually running against me. But I did prevail, and I was just really very excited to be able to enter the Massachusetts legislature as a state representative. And I feel that it's been a very positive experience. I've had many, many opportunities to really give back in so many ways. And when I was the chair of the Committee on Children, Families, and Persons with Disabilities, someone did come to me, a freelance reporter came to me to ask me if I knew that this is a situation where across the country, girls, mostly girls, are being forced into a marriage situation, and that they're underage. And I sort of took it on at that point and said that I would move forward and get a group together and take a look and to see if this is really the case. And that at that point, I was able to form a small group of leaders in the field of law and working in various areas, and another legislator from the Senate, and together we really put together legislation and filed the legislation. And it was probably about 2016 when we got everything together and put it forward. And it was really, it's been a long haul. And after the freelance reporter came out with a piece that appeared in the Boston Globe about the issue of child marriage, and that he had been in touch with me, I was contacted by an organization called Unchained at Last, out of New Jersey, and they had been working on this in some of the other states. And so they really connected with me, and so we started down the path of trying to move this legislation forward. And it was 6 years, 6 long years of really working at this and gathering a lot of support with a coalition came together, and other legislators came together to sign on to the legislation. There were just many pieces to this whole process of trying to move this legislation forward. So being as I said, the House Chair of the Committee on Children and Families, it was a big interest of mine, and I was really surprised myself to find that this is a problem.
So, Representative, let's take a step back. Thank you for that summary. It's very, very helpful for all of us. But let's take a step back because, as Rima was saying before you came on, Representative, oftentimes when legislation on this issue is proposed, we oftentimes hear from the opposition, well, is this really a problem? Or is this the proverbial solution in search of a problem? Was there a issue with child marriage in Massachusetts when you started this effort a while back?
Well, I think what came about, actually, a couple of things. One is that we didn't get anybody stepping up and saying that they were opposed to this idea. They wanted to understand it better. I think that in Massachusetts, the age of marriage is supposed to be 18. And as it turns out, there's a loophole. And the loophole in Massachusetts is that a parent or parents can go before the court and ask permission to have their child, be allowed to have their child married. And so what the kinds of things I was getting was, well, if they said, oh, well, it's not happening in Massachusetts. That was kind of the first thought. It doesn't happen here. And they wanted to know if there are people in Massachusetts where this has occurred. And so long story short, we were able to find a couple of people in Massachusetts who were willing to come forward and talk about their own experience. And so that was very helpful when the legislation, first of all, I don't know how states differ a little bit here and there, but in Massachusetts, when the bill was filed, every bill in Massachusetts, any bill that gets filed, and we have about 6,000 to 7,000 bills that get filed every session. Our sessions are 2 years. And when the bill gets filed, every bill gets a public hearing. It goes to a committee, and then it gets a public hearing. And so the public can come forward. And so we did bring people forward who speak about it, and we were able to get at least one or two folks women who had experienced this issue, and they were very willing to testify. So that was helpful. And that was really, I think, just trying to educate. It's about educating people. People I didn't even know. Here I am, a nurse. I'm a legislator, had no idea that this was happening. So a lot of it has to do with education, educating folks that this is a problem, this is happening. And so it takes a lot of time to do that. And I think that if there's an interest, California is such a big state. And I know that, for example, in Massachusetts, I represent about 42,000 people as a state rep. in California, and I know this because I invited my granddaughter to invite her representative and wanted to go to her school with her to talk about public policy and what it's like to, be a public person, and how, it's important to think about laws, and, just to give a little bit of civics education. And the representative from that particular district in Los Angeles said he was very sorry he couldn't attend because he represents 475,000 people. So California is not an easy state to really, I don't know what it's like to get laws passed in California, but if you have representatives that represent 475,000 people, it's not easy to get their attention. And so I guess I'm wondering what the organization is doing in terms of reaching out to legislators, because you can't get this done unless it gets filed as a piece of legislation. So I don't know how far along you all are in terms of moving in that direction.
Great question, Representative. We talked about that before you were able to join us. REMA shared, including legislation that was introduced this year. And unfortunately, we've not been successful. When I served in the state Senate out here in California, just to underscore how big our population is, I represented slightly over 1 million residents in my Senate district here just south of Los Angeles. So they're actually bigger than congressional seats here in California. But nonetheless, I want to go back to another issue that you had raised that we see happen all the time in other states, where the existing law says they ban child marriage under 18 unless, and the exception you just identified, which is parents go to a court and ask a judge's permission to allow that particular marriage. And that's oftentimes also used by opposition in various states to say, well, there's already checks in here to make sure there isn't an abusive situation or a forced situation. You got the parents approving of it, you get a judge. So my question for you, as we look at all of this, I would assume, because you ran the straight out ban, no exceptions bill, that that sort of quote unquote checks on child marriages, parental approval plus judicial approval, really didn't address the problem of forced of child marriages. So your comments, Representative, on that type of system that used to be the law there in Massachusetts.
Yeah, I'm not sure I completely understand your question. I'm sorry.
No problem, Representative. So obviously there were checks in the system under prior law there in your state, that is judicial approval. I'm assuming that was not satisfactory. I wonder whether most of the judges who face that question just rubber stamped it and approved the marriage since the parents supported it. Any thoughts on that? Because we hear that in opposition to the straight out bans in other states, that the judicial check is enough.
It's not. I mean, it certainly was not in Massachusetts. And in fact, surprisingly, during the pandemic, there were 14 applicants for marrying children in, I think it was 2020. 14 families came before the court. The judges really didn't have anything to, first of all, the judges need to be educated, believe it or not. Everyone needs to be educated that this is a problem, and we have the statistics to show that. We have, as I think Rima was, or someone was saying, 300,000 children since I think 2018 have been married, forced into marriage. The judges sort of rubber stamp it because they don't really think about the fact that maybe they need to talk to the child, pull the child aside, have a conversation. The problem that arises with that is that the children are, even though, they're sort of loyal to their parents, and it's very hard for them to be taken aside and to say anything against the parents. So this legislation, what it does is it really gives the judges a sure reason why they can say no. And they, I think some of the judges probably struggle with it a little bit when the problem comes before them, but they need to have the ability to say no, because this is the law. And I think without the law, they don't have a secure ability to say no.
Got it.
Helpful,
yep.
But
No, very much so, Representative. So let's go into the legislative process there in Massachusetts when you and others were pushing the bills since 2016, if I recalled your comment earlier. Who were your primary opponents and what was the basis of their opposition to the bill?
Well, I would say that, first of all, in Massachusetts, I don't know what it's like in California, but we have 6,000 to 7,000 pieces of legislation that get filed every 2 years. And in between, there are late files as well. So, we have in our legislature, and I think it's somewhat similar in California, we have 200 legislators, and 200 legislators all have priorities. And so one of the things that happens in Massachusetts is when a bill gets filed, the legislator or legislators, in this case, we had myself as a rep, House of Representatives person, and then we had a senator who also wanted to get in on this as well. So together, the two of us spent a lot of time and energy reaching out to our colleagues to sign on and support the legislation. So that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort because, as I said, and I'm sure it's similar in California, you've got probably about 200 legislators and they are all working on their own agenda. So it takes time and effort, and what is helpful is it's not just the legislators that you want the legislators to sign on to support the legislation, and the more legislators you get to sign on, it looks better. So we were very much able to get out of the 200, I think we got something like 120 legislators signed on to support the legislation. But in order to really move it forward, you need the outside groups working as well. And so a coalition of folks who can contact their own state representative to make sure that that state representative is thinking of this as a priority and willing to support, willing to write letters, willing to really step up at a public hearing and support the legislation. So it's a lot of forces working together. And this is where, in my situation, the organization Unchained at Last out of New Jersey, they really took this on. And they, in fact, have been able to get, we were the 7th state. So they were able to get Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Massachusetts now, Rhode Island, and I don't know if that's 7, but there were 7 states that actually they were able to get the work done. And so they coming forward, forming a coalition, staying on top of it. They called new legislators were just coming into office, meeting with them, getting them to get a group together so they could constantly lobby for the legislation. So it really takes a village, to get these things done. And it's not just the legislators themselves, but it's also the forces from the outside that can really move it forward. In Massachusetts, it got a little complicated because the bill that the senator filed, they were eager to do it in the Senate, so the Senate passed it. And not without too much difficulty, but the House held it up. And it's always more difficult in the House because in Massachusetts, we have 160 legislators and they all want their own thing, or they may have something. I think one of the things that came up in Massachusetts was the Roe Act, actually, because they were confused. People were confused about how the Roe Act was connected to the child marriage. So that's something you folks might want to think about. I have some information that I'm happy to share, in writing. But that came up for us, the Roe Act. And then we just kept working it. And Yeah, like I said, the 1 year, this past session, just the session that's finishing now, we did just pass the legislation altogether. The session before, it passed in Senate, but it didn't pass in the House, so it didn't get the full support. And so it's complicated. I'm sure you as a senator must have a million things you can say as well in terms of how complex it is when you get right down to it, in the legislative body. And there are all kinds of things that come into play.
It's Representative. It's what I refer to as the 5-layer chess game that you must play on any proposed piece of legislation. A very non-linear process, as we know. And just for our viewing audience, there are a total of 120 legislators in California. We tend to be proportionately this very small legislature compared to our population of about 40 million people. But Representative, could you identify the top 1 or 2 outside organizations that oppose the legislation and tell us why? It's troubling for a lot of folks who first see this issue or exposed to it, and they ask the obvious question, which I know you're familiar with, Representative. Why would anybody oppose banning marriages under 18?
We did not have any organization step forward and oppose the legislation. I have to tell you, it did not happen. It was just a matter of trying to maneuver to get the work done. There were some legislators that, again, were confused about how the Roe Act and child marriage kind of, what was the difference there. And it was just a couple of legislators that had those questions. I can honestly tell you, we had tremendous support. You may turn to a group called Zonta. Zonta is an international group. I became familiar with them. This was their #1 priority. There wasn't, it was just a matter of, as you know, in the legislature, it's trying to sort of maneuver. And like you said, it's a chess game. There's a lot of strategy. And we didn't have any group come forward and say they were opposed, including the ACLU. They stayed with us.
Boy, I wish we had that scenario here in California and other states where the ACLU, as you know, actually opposes it. But we'll get to that. If you remember, just out of curiosity, in that final vote in both the Senate and your House, what were the vote counts when it passed the floor of each House?
Okay, so it was an interesting answer to that, and that working at it really strenuously, it turned out that our minority leader could see that the leadership was having difficulty. I don't know, there were some, I have my suspicions, but there were some that were trying to hold it up for whatever reason. And the minority leader of our House stepped up, and he actually put the legislation into the budget. He made it a budget amendment. And so it passed unanimously because it did come out through the budget. And so it was a unanimous. First of all, when it went to the Senate, the bill that went to the Senate, that passed unanimously in the Senate. Not one person spoke against it. When it didn't get it out of the House, but ultimately, when all was said and done, it was put into the budget by the minority leader. So in Massachusetts, so we're a very heavily Democratic state, very small group. Maybe out of the 200 legislators, maybe 35, 36 are Republicans. But there was a minority leader that stepped up, and he wanted to see it happen. So it was really bipartisan support, and he put it into the budget. And once it got accepted in the budget, which of course then the Speaker and the Senate President have to okay. Once it got into the budget, and they wanted to get it done, they were trying to figure out how to get it done as well. The minority leader putting it in as an amendment, it came through the budget, and so it was unanimous.
And just for our viewers, Representative, I follow you completely, but as you know, most folks, even seasoned folks observing politics, don't really understand all the legislative intricate moves. And why attaching it to the budget allowed it to get through. Just in lay terms, just out of curiosity, explain for our viewers today.
Okay, well, the Massachusetts budget, first of all, the House has its budget, the Senate has its budget, and when the budget was passed in the House, we do our budget. The governor does their budget first, then the House does its budget. Our budget finished up at the end of April. Then it goes to the Senate. The Senate does their budget, and then there's a conference committee, and the conference committee irons out both the House and the two. We have 6 members of a conference committee that iron out the differences between the House and the Senate. And it was still a worry whether they would come together and include this when the budget got done. And so they did include it, and the other pieces of the budget, they ironed out, if they're going to go with the Senate number or the House number, and it's a lot of negotiation that goes on in a conference committee. But this was supported in the conference. There was no question about it. And so it did come out through the budget, and therefore it was 100% supported.
Congratulations on that. I know those strategic moves you have to make. Curious, were there any requests or demands that you compromised the legislative language from the version you first introduced?
Yes, actually, interestingly, the chair of the Judiciary Committee was concerned for young people under the age of 18 who want to get out of the marriage that they're in and have no way of doing that, because under the age of 18, you just can't walk into a court and ask for help in Massachusetts. So he put in a sentence into the original legislation that allows for anyone under the age of 18 to step up into the courtroom and get help in terms of filing for divorce. So it strengthened the original legislation.
That it's amazing, as we hear in other states, those intricate aspects of the law and how there can be complications that need to be dealt with along the way. Tell us about, obviously, and I know you understand this better than all of us on the call, the politics to get a bill through the legislature may be different than the politics to get a governor to sign a bill that arrives on his or her desk. Tell us about any interactions you had with the governor's office before the bill was signed.
Well, that's an interesting question, because as you know, when a budget comes out after the conference committee finish up with the budget, it goes to the governor. And then the governor has 10 days, at least 10 days, before he has to decide if he's going to veto anything. And so the governor sends something back to the legislature that he has vetoed. And so, in many cases, we generally have, if something's come out of the conference committee, we end up spending time overriding the governor's vetoes. Often is what happens. This was not controversial. It was already set in the budget, and so the governor, he eventually signed it. It took him he didn't actually sign the budget. We like the budget. The governor likes to have everything likes to be done in the budget by July 1st. He actually did not sign the budget until July 27th in this case. So we were still, on edge until the governor signed the budget, because he could have vetoed it. However, in this case, Brad Jones, who was our minority leader, so we have in Massachusetts, we have a situation where we have a very pro-democratic legislature, but we also often have a Republican governor. And in Massachusetts, we have a Republican governor who's finishing up now, and we're moving toward a Democratic governor. And because the minority leader was very much interested in this legislation, he worked with the governor They were, being the same party, the minority leader being Republican and the governor being Republican. It just worked out that he was able to work with the governor, and there was no question it wasn't vetoed, and it finally got done. 6
Yeah,
years.
it's amazing, Representative, to listen to you, and I hope for our viewers as well, how many intricate moves you have to do throughout the process of that legislation, how many politics you have to anticipate. One house is different than the other house, different than the governor's office, and your comments really help shine a light on all of that, and congratulations on that. Curious, although we hope it's unanimous support, but did any of the media publications in Massachusetts come out editorial-wise or op-ed-wise and support or oppose the legislation?
No. Nobody opposed, no opposition at all. And I think in Massachusetts, the ACLU stayed out. They just didn't get involved. And other than that, there was nothing, no opposition. It was just a matter of trying to figure out how to maneuver. And the first session it got filed, oftentimes first sessions, when bills are filed in the first session, they don't go through. It takes, in Massachusetts anyway, it can take a long time to get the attention. So because there's so many priorities. So the first two sessions, 2, 4, 6. So the first session it went into a study. The second session, the Senate passed it, but not the House. So the Senate was mad. They did it, but we didn't. But then the third session, this one that we're just finishing up, it got done. So it's just persistence, as you know. It's persistence. It's sticking with it. It's fighting for what you believe in and care about, and working with your colleagues and also the outside forces to really help and bring attention to something that you really feel is so important. And that's what I think, this is very important legislation. People don't realize that they don't know it's a problem. Mm-hmm. And so the more attention you can bring to it, the better. And so I would just recommend, I think that I have a lot of confidence in this organization, Unchained, at last. I would talk to them. They got 7 states on board, and they're still working at it. They know exactly how to lobby the legislature, and it was a trip for them, believe me, because Rhode Island did it in a minute. They passed it right away, and so I think it was a lesson for them in terms of how hard it is to get legislation done. And I think unique in California because, like you said, you only have 150 or 108. I forget how many legislators. So I would think it would be really hard in California just because it's hard to get attention, and it's a lot of people to have to represent and listen to, and I know you don't have huge staff either. I happen to know all of this because of my granddaughter who was in elementary school when I offered to come out and talk about civics, and I had to look it up myself in terms of what's happening in California. So it's a real challenge in California. So I think that it's just so I think joining forces is the way to go. And again, we have lots of organizations, the Caucus of Women Legislators, we have a commission on the status of women, the Zonta organization, the coalition that we developed, UNICEF USA was behind it. There was just so many groups that were behind it. So that's what was very helpful.
Senator Dunn, if I may say something. Thank you, Rep. Khan, for being our guest here. I've asked the child marriage survivors that we have here with us whether the judges just rubber stamped their marriage, and the answer was yes. Also, in addition, you were not on the call with us when I indicated that we made history in California when we launched the California Coalition to End Child Marriage. We have 4 categories. We have child marriage survivors. We have organizations, which include UNICEF, Unchained at Last, and others, also United Nations associations, labor unions, and all others. We also have an elected official, so there's a whole number of elected officials that are partnering with us, and also community leaders. And so while we are talking, we did author our own legislations to be introduced, and that's been stalled. It was reviewed by Senator John, by Peggy Wong, by others here in the room, and it's ready to go. At the same time that we're talking to the state elected officials, we've been passing resolutions, no child marriage under 18, no exceptions in cities. And we have multiple people here with us who help lead that effort for us and pass it, like back then, Mayor Peggy Wong, Mayor Chad Zimmerman. We passed it in 13 out of the 34 cities in Orange County and in Culver City. And people can go on our website if they have great and close relationships with their cities to pass. We'll personalize the resolution for them. So we've been passing these resolutions along the same time that we're working with state elected officials in order to pass it statewide. We've also been talking to federal elected officials to see if we can pass it on the federal level. So, and we've been partnering with a whole multiple organizations and continually adding them in order to build a larger coalition here in California.
I think that's great. And you want all of those people to go forward to contact their own legislator and, you know, really work it. I have to apologize. I have to get off now because I have to go to this little event with my granddaughter. And, you know, it's been great talking to all of you, and I appreciate it. Was great to have your senator on board here because he knows, you know, he's got a lot of inside information in terms of how the whole process works. And I would just, you know, encourage you to keep going. It's just, it's so important. It's so important to educate people. I'd get right in there and meet the new mayor of Los Angeles and see if you can get her on board as well. I think she'll have a lot of influence because you know, she's representing a huge population in Los Angeles. But I really have to go. I apologize, but my granddaughter's a senior in high school. I want to see her perform her dance program, and I don't want to miss it. So I'm going to hang out. But you know.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. And we also have here in the room with us elected officials, candidates who just been elected, and we invited them so they can learn more about this topic because there's going to be new senators and new assembly members. So thank you, Rep. K. Khan, for being with us today despite the technical difficulties.
Yes, I'm sorry about that. That's too bad that happened. But anyway, it was great talking to all of you. I'd say keep on going and getting as many people as possible, and the media can be very helpful because they can, you know, do articles and put it out there as well. And again, we didn't have any opposition. And, you know, some people said, "Oh, well, my parents got married when they were 16, and look at me, I'm okay." But that's a handful of people. Mm-hmm. It's really important to get the message out. There's just so many. And the one thing too is no particular group either. It goes across all ethnic groups, and it's happening. And so we need to make sure we get this out there and stopped. And so I really think it's great that you're all working at it. And I would definitely connect with Unchained. They've had a lot of experience now getting 7 states done, and they've got a lot they can probably offer in this whole realm of what needs to happen. So thank you for inviting me, and I apologize. Nice to meet you, Joe.
Thank you. You too, Representative.
So, and stay in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Kristen. So I want to thank every one of you that you're stuck with us. And I know some of you had to leave, and that's understandable. We apologize again for the technical difficulties. Thank you. If you allow me, Senator Joe Dunn, before you do your closing remarks, to remind people that in the chat, we've we've entered the link for you to digitally write your elected official, both state and federal, and in California and in all other states. I put the link there so you can send your elected officials a digital letter urging them to pass legislation to end child marriage under 18, no exceptions. And I will be remiss in not recognizing my other board members, such as Kristen Manna and Gus Tobia, here with us. And of course, I'll be remiss, and they will hold me accountable if I don't say, please donate to Global Hope 365. Now that they elected our keynote speaker, elected official left, now we can ask for donations. So please donate to fund our program in order to advocate for legislation, in order to raise awareness. We go to schools, universities, private and public schools, interfaith groups. We also have chapters now that we're starting at universities and high schools. The first one is Berkeley, and we're working on Chapman and Cal State Fullerton. And yes, Berkeley, Kristen, I saw your hand, and that's because of a contact that Kristen provided for us. And so you can write your elected officials, you can call them, you can start a chapter, you can join being an ambassador. We have both a youth ambassador and an adult ambassador, which is a program called PATH. Thank you, Senator. Should we now, I know we're over the 10 o'clock deadline, but if anybody has any questions, and please, Senator, if you'd like to make closing remarks.
Well, let's first see if anybody has any questions, and then I'm happy to close out. No questions, Rima?
I guess, yes, Kristen.
Rima, could you, and Senator Dunn, could you please reaffirm to us what we can do to help in these efforts, what everybody can do, just to give us a synopsis on that?
Basically, as I mentioned, thank you, Senator. We have the digital letter writing campaign. Ali Riza, if you can put that back again. So you can donate to Global Hope 365. You can become a monthly donor or a one-time donor. You can do a peer-to-peer campaign. It takes less than 5 minutes. The link is in the chat too. If you can post that again, Ali Riza. So you can have a birthday peer-to-peer campaign to all your friends and family to donate to Global Hope. Join in our letter writing campaign to your elected officials. Call them, make appointments with them, pass a resolution in your city or county. Contact us to do that. We'll personalize it for you. So again, start a chapter, call your elected official, donate, and call us if you have any other questions. Does that answer yours, Kristen?
Yes, thank you.
If I can add to that, Rima, just quickly. Kristen, what I wanted to add to Rima's answer to your question is, once we get back in session here in California in January, it'll be a new composition, of course, of the legislature as a result of our elections a few weeks ago. The reason I took the representative through some of the nitty-gritty steps of the legislative process is, at least from my perspective, I hope everyone began to see from an inside perspective the politics of getting legislation like this through change from committee to committee, from house to house, and from the legislature to the governor's office. When that starts in January, it's critical that as many involved here in this call and who care about the issue, period, stay on alert for notification, because we might see there's two problematic state senators on Judiciary Committee, and we got to flood those two. We don't need to flood everybody, all the members, just those two. Very strategic approach. Same when it gets to the floor of one house. Same when it goes to the committee system through the second house. Same when it gets to the floor in the second house. And of course, as I said, the politics of a governor's office, even if the same party as a majority in the legislature, are very, very different. when we did the window legislation to reopen the civil statute of limitations for child sex abuse back in '02, which I authored, and it was passed and signed by then Governor Craig Davis in the fall of '02. The one-year window opened up in '03. He did not want to sign that bill. He did everything to avoid putting his signature on that bill. And for those from California here on the call, you know Governor Craig Davis was a Democrat. Well known, he held several other offices before the legislature, but it was brutal political hardball that we had to play to get the governor to sign that legislation, which he did. To his credit, he did, and he embraced it once he signed it, but he did not want to do that. That's the similar dynamics we might face here. The opposition may target their opposition on the governor's office and ignore the legislature, and their opposition campaign to the governor's office will start this fall, not next year. So it's all of these steps, Kristen, that it's important to stay alert. And I'm sure Rima will be sending out notice. We need you to write a letter. We need you to call these two offices, and that's it. Just very strategic. So I just want to add that to Rima's comments.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Senator.
If you'd like to be added to our email list / newsletter, please put your email here in the chat and we'll add you to our newsletter. Amal, you had your hand up.
Yes, quick question. I know, for example, I live in Irvine, and I know the city of Irvine has adopted, the legislation for no child marriage below 18. Can I, as a citizen, as a resident of California, send those people who are opposing in another place a letter? Like, for example, those two problematic people that you were referring to, Senator. Can I, as a resident of a city that adopted, still send it out?
Yes. When it comes to legislators, Emma,
Yes.
the answer is absolutely yes.
Okay.
Is, anybody in the state, because the legislature represents the state. Yes, each member represents the geographical area. It's going to be less effective for residents of Irvine to send letters to, say, my city, the city of Santa Ana, right next door. That's less effective. Santa Ana city council members need to hear from Santa Ana residents, just like Irvine need to hear from Irvine residents. But the legislature is a different play. That letters from all over the state to one legislator in one particular area, that is a necessary component, because you want the legislature as a whole to understand this is not just a district issue, this is a statewide issue.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And as it was mentioned and stressed out by Rep. Khan, is that education. In real estate, we say location. So invite us to speak. I go speak at interfaith groups, at universities, colleges. Even if you want to host something at your home, invite me, and I'll go to Louisiana if you pay the airfare to you. So I love to drink coffee at and have beignets. But yes, so invite us to speak. And if you want to set up a meeting with your elected officials, we can come and join that meeting with you, either through Zoom or in person, in order to educate them on the topic. So we need to start from now. You need to join us. We've already started a long time ago, but you need to join us so we have higher and more power, and set up those meetings so we can educate both the elected officials and the voters, because we need to educate both tandem. Any other questions before we leave? Nevada, Valerie, do you have any information on Nevada? That is my state. As you can see, Elizabeth Siton. Elizabeth, would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I can just tell you that I was taken from California to Las Vegas. I think they thought it would be easier to get the forced marriage to happen there. I was forced to marry at the age of 16 to a 28-year-old near stranger in a cult. And no one asked my opinion in Nevada, or my point of view or anything. I mean, it was basically just rubber stamped. I don't remember the clerk actually talking to me at all. So we, I testified there and we weren't successful at getting it to be 18 no exceptions.
Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. And we applaud you, Don Tyree, Sarah Tasneem, and Genevieve Myers, child marriage survivor leaders, for working with us in order and joining. And they've testified with me in other states, and they've also testified with me here at cities that passed the resolution for us. And our resolution has been passing unanimously, even when we were so polarized as a country back in 2020. It passed unanimously. In some cities, it was introduced by Republicans, just like Peggy Wong and Diane Dixon in Newport Beach, Peggy in Yorba Linda. In others, it was introduced by Democrats. So they all work together because to them, child marriage coercion is child abuse. So let's name it the way it is. It's child abuse, it's child sexual abuse at the same time, and it's statutory rape, all combined. Let's pull the blinders off and call a spade a spade. So that's how we need to approach it, and we need to end this type of child abuse. And I want to thank everyone. Thank you, Senator Joe Dunn, for co-hosting this with me and for joining our board. It's such a privilege. And thank you, everyone, for attending. And again, thanks the survivors for your advocacy. And I'm glad to see email addresses here. And we'll add you to our newsletter and email list. So at this time, we're going to end the meeting unless there's a burning question. Have a great weekend. Happy Thanksgiving. And
Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.